Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thinker St. James here, and the new UFC betting scandal has dropped. Only 3 short years after James Krause and his scandal involving fight fixing and betting on fights, we are back with the new hotness. If you were watching UFC Fight Night, Garcia versus Onama, you probably saw this fight. This is Isaac Dulgarian versus Yadier del Valle. And if you are not a betting person, what you saw was an undefeated, somewhat of a newcomer to the organization in Yadier del Valle, taking on Isaac Dulgarian, who is a more experienced, often a finisher himself, and a fighter who had never been finished, important to note, get finished in the first round of this fight, completely dominated in this fight by Del Valle. That would be the perception on the surface. However, if you are a betting person, what you might know is that just prior to this fight taking place, the money line shifted dramatically, and I will explain what that means. So here you have an image that shows Isaac Dulgarian's odds going into this fight. Now, my book had Isaac Dulgarian as a much heavier favorite. They had him as a minus 900. This starts out with Isaac Dulgarian as a minus 240. Now, what that means, if you're not a betting person, is that in the United States at least, the money line works in this fashion. If a favorite is minus 240, that means that you would have to put up $240, place that bet on this fighter in order to win $100 back. On the opposite side of that, if the underdog is plus money, that means that if you put up $100, you would win whatever that plus is. So in this case, Yadier del Valle, I believe, was in the range of a plus 120 underdog. So if you had put up $100, you would have won $120 back. So Dulgarian starts out at a minus 240. That is a sizable favorite, not crazy in this sport. As I said, my book had him as a minus 900. So A, I have a terrible book and need to change. That's besides the point. B, Isaac Dulgarian was always the favorite and a pretty heavy one at that, relatively speaking. So as this chart shows, he starts off at a minus 240. The line tightens up a little bit right after it opens up. What that generally signals is that a lot of money is coming in on both sides. The book is readjusting to account for all of the money coming in. And important to note with that as well, if you're not a betting person, is that Las Vegas keeps stock of all of the transactions regarding all of the sports wagering. And if there is a large amount of money coming in on either side or in general with these fights, they will shift the odds based on the amount of action for the fight. So in this case, a lot of money comes in, perhaps on Del Valle. Maybe people think that he is more of potentially a winner in this competition. The line tightens up. Probably a little bit thereafter, more people start putting the money on Dulgarian, again as the favorite, so it goes back down a little bit, and around this midpoint here is where it stays for a little while, and then it drops back down to him being even more of a heavy favorite. So always you can see that even after it tightened up, he was always a pretty heavy favorite. Before the massive tick up, which we'll talk about in a second, the lowest that he went was maybe around 150, minus 150. So still a favorite, but not as big of a favorite based on what I've outlined here. So he drops down a little bit with that around 150 area. It tightens up in that regard, gets wider here, gets way wider here. He's even bigger of a favorite than he started out with at this point, all the way up until this point right here. And what that point is about maybe 40 minutes to an hour before this fight took place. So what you see with this is the line instantly jumping very, very high. When he drops down, that number gets lower. It gets closer to 0. That means that he is becoming more closer to an underdog, or at least more close to even odds. So again, for the non-betting people among us, This 240 would mean that you would have to put up $240 to win 100 back. This 150 means that you would have to put up 150 to win 100 back. So quite a significant difference. Well, what made the line shift that much? We'll talk about that in a second. This other image here is the opposite direction for Del Valle winning in round 1. You see that this starts off at a big, massive underdog, massive long shot prediction at plus 850. And then by the time that the fight starts, this huge drop off right here, very similar. If you look at the way that this goes up dramatically and very rapidly, this goes down dramatically and very rapidly around the same time. And it becomes from 850 to a plus 500, meaning that a lot of people were taking Del Valle to win in the first round. So initially, before all of whatever fishiness happened, if they had put $100 down, they would have won 850 back originally. Now, if they put 100 down, they would only win 500 back because of the shift in the lines. This is very uncommon for this big of a shift without there being some kind of fishiness. So what could it have been? What could have put the wheels in motion to make this massive change happen? Well, there are two general ways of thinking when it comes to that type of situation. One is a little bit more benefit of the doubt. The other is a little bit less, to put it lightly. One would be that there was an undisclosed injury or a sickness or some type of compromisation of that fighter where there was inside information that was known that somehow got out to the world. The world ends up shifting the line. There you have it. Now that would in and of itself still be very unscrupulous. However, that information got out to the world because you're essentially letting a fighter go into a fight compromised, now knowing that there is a large potential for them to lose the fight. However, that is not necessarily and strictly fight fixing. We saw this with TJ Dillashaw versus Aljamain Sterling. He had a shoulder which had some type of injuries to it. He needed surgery on it. The shoulder ends up popping out in the fight. He can't go on. He, after the fight, says, I fought through it. I was trying to push through. I wanted to make it to the fight, yada, yada. So he went into the fight compromised knowing it, but that information did not necessarily get out. We also saw this recently with Jared Gordon, where Gordon fought a pretty good fight, all things considered, but it came out after the fact that he had gotten run over by a car earlier in the day, at least his foot. So odd circumstances there, but again, not necessarily fight fixing. However, in that regard, what is unscrupulous about it is the fact that the information got out to the public, that it was leaked at all, because once it becomes public knowledge outside of the sphere of that fighter and his team, then the fix is essentially in. Not strictly speaking, the fighter is not taking a dive. The fighter might still win the fight, perhaps, even under the compromised circumstances, but it is much more unlikely and thus closer to going in the opposite direction if that information becomes public. People can utilize that, so close to fixing, but not exactly. The other version of this, and the more nefarious one, is that there was in fact a fix in play. The fighter is going into the fight knowing that they are going to lose, intentionally losing the fight, or at least going in to put on a performance of sorts, but still end up losing. Losing at a specific time, a specific round, etc., etc., the outcome being predetermined by one of the fighters, potentially in this case, not confirmed, but speculatively speaking, Isaac Dulgarian. What was the case? We don't know the answer to that yet, but the pieces of this puzzle started unraveling very quickly and has now become quite the discourse online. So, this was so bad that because of these massive shifts, some sports books actually stopped taking bets on this fight altogether, and others halted props. Prop bets are betting on a specific method, an outcome of a fight. They are additional bets on top of what you can bet on the money line. So if you limit the prop bets, that is a signal that there is some kind of shadiness going on. And books taking no action on a fight is definitely a huge tell. This is an even bigger tell here. This is Caesars Sportsbook. They, I believe, also own William Hill. I think they're connected in some way. This is the same message for both. But either way, William Hill and Caesars Sportsbook, two very large books in the game, both saying here that anyone who lost money on this fight is getting a refund for it. Now that definitely signals a big problem, because sportsbooks are not in the business of giving money back. They want your money. They want you to not have your money. They will give you the money if you earn it legitimately through their operation, but they are not in the business of giving money out for free unless it is to bait you into spending more money. So anyway, books are not taking action. They stop action just before the fight or as the fight's starting. Fishiness all over the place. This was all the concerning stuff going on here. And what we were seeing on Twitter, which you should definitely be skeptical of, because I certainly am. All of this is speculation. These could all be randos who have absolutely no connection to anything. However, the conversation surrounding this very shady operation that was going on here was rampantly rising and becoming very hot online very quickly. So what we saw here is this person posting, I don't even know where this post was from. It looks like maybe Reddit. Something saying that nothing is confirmed, obviously, but I am hearing that there's something going on with Dulgarian versus Del Valle. Not sure if concerns are about a fix or injury. There were people saying that it might have been that Dulgarian had an injury to his hand. He looked pretty okay in the fight, whatever, but that was one version of it. Somebody else kind of erroneously saying that there might have been some juicing allegations, whatever. I don't really buy that one, but either way, a lot of speculation about it, and that's what this person is hearing, that they don't know if it's a fix or an injury or whatever it is. Friend who works for Hard Rock says that they have got 5 very large bets from different people on Del Valle round 1. Activity was flagged in their system, and apparently there's a lot of buzz about it there right now. Hard Rock, obviously another book in the space, same as Caesars or Bet Online or any of these books that you might have heard of. Hard Rock getting massive bets coming in and activity being flagged. A lot of things not adding up, very strange, them kind of scrambling to figure out what's going on. So that's one version of the events here. There's this guy, Harry Mack, who has been talking up a storm about this and had said a couple of other things regarding this situation. But he was saying that it's possible that the FBI may have been aware of this and notified the UFC about the abnormal action. This is all purely speculation. This person claims to be a matchmaker and promoter in New York. I cannot confirm any of that, but again, this is what the conversation is, because this is a major crime. This goes beyond. People are thinking about this in terms of, oh, what is the UFC going to do about this? Absolutely nothing. The UFC is not going to do anything about this aside from telling their fighters explicitly again to not bet on fights and not be involved with anything like this. However, the people who are going to do something about it are the fucking FBI, because this is majorly serious stuff. This goes into lots of money. This goes into interstate commerce. This is a federal case at this point for something like this, as was the situation with a guy called James Krause, who you might have heard of a few years ago. I referenced that earlier. If you're not aware, James Krause is a former UFC fighter himself turned coach who basically was exiled from the sport for telling the entire world, essentially, he was on Ariel Helwani's show, telling everyone and anyone that he makes more money betting on fighting than he does from coaching, or that he did as a fighter himself. He had a Discord where he would openly discuss betting and give his predictions and picks. And he also, in addition to that, had a fighter named Derek Minner in the fight with Shailan Nordembeke, who came into the fight compromised, and the allegations were very similar to what we're seeing with Dulgarian in the fight with Del Valle. Person coming into the fight compromised. The fight has all kinds of shadiness now associated with it. The fight goes the direction that the new bettors who placed all of this money very quickly before the fight starts on it were hoping it would go. that it all works out for them, and now the fix is in. So I don't know if they ever actually confirmed that it was full on a fix, but Derek Minner was released from the organization over it. James Krause also persona non grata as far as the UFC is concerned as well. James Krause's gym, Glory MMA, basically shut down operation as far as graduating fighters to the UFC goes. Well, wouldn't you know it? Isaac Dulgarian himself, he was interviewed going into the fight that we were talking about here, that's at the heart of the matter, on MMA Junkie Radio. And they ask him what happened to Glory MMA because he was a student of James Krause's at one point. The connection is also very fishy under the circumstances. He is now at Factory X, but was a student of Glory MMA when he started out. So let's hear how Mr. Dulgarian frames this connection in his own words.
Tell me where you train. You're based in the Midwest, Kansas City, I believe, or?
I originally started training in Kansas City at Glory MMA, and now I'm out in Denver, Colorado at Factory X, under Coach Mark Montoya.
Does Glory MMA exist anymore, or did James have to shut the whole thing down?
Yeah, they exist. I don't know any fighters. There's no UFC fighters there, but they still do their cardio kickbox and teach people how to fight and stuff. So
what he's saying there and what they're talking about is that the James that he referenced is James Krause had to cease all operation regarding fighters entering the UFC when he once had a roster of very prominent fighters, names that are ones that you may have been aware of at the time, all had to go elsewhere if they wanted to continue with the UFC, and James Krause no longer has any connection to the organization. So what Dulgarian is saying is that he started out there, James Krause no more, Glory MMA is Glory MMA no more.
You keep in touch with them anymore, or did everyone just distance themselves? I see you selling real estate or something like that.
And I was told I'm not supposed to be in contact. That's all I really know. I just moved out here. I just moved out here to Denver, and start training under Mark Montoya, and just kind of stay in my lane out here.
If Dulgarian is acting, I do have to say that he is playing it pretty cool as a cucumber. I mean, nothing raises too many red flags on the eye test from this, but what he's saying is, look, I got nothing to do with it. However, in the same conversation here, we'll let this run, he does say that I'm the fighter, I'm out there, you're making money on me, maybe I should get a little taste of that.
I don't know if you know this, but a lot of people gamble, a lot of fans, and all over the world, man.
People always message me and tell me how much money they made. I'm like, I need 10%, brother.
Do they ever tell you, hey, because you have a balanced attack. I think you have 4 stoppages, TKOs, they're all stoppages, and 3 submissions. So a lot of times that's good for you because you have a balanced attack. But the people that bet that are trying to do prop bets, they have a little bit more of a problem because the fighters are so well versed that they can stop you in many ways.
Hey, I say don't bet on me unless you're paying me some percentage. I'm doing all the work. That's how I feel about it.
Well, perhaps he got his percentage after all. So yeah, that's basically the gist of that. Now, this Harry Mack character has been, like I said, piping up a whole lot about this thing. And again, this is completely unconfirmed. However, if it is true, it's also pretty wild. And I do feel that it is relevant to add just in case. Take it with a grain of salt, absolutely. Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. However, what he says here is his update. Federal regulators have flagged over 100 UFC fights this year for abnormal betting patterns, including 2 additional fighters on last night's card. Shit is about to get very ugly. Still working to confirm, but it sounds like the feds are moving to audit Herzog's fights. Jason Herzog, he's referencing there, the referee. That is a very, very huge allegation. If that were true, it would call into question every single fight that Jason Herzog has ever refereed and the legitimacy thereof. There was just a sports betting scandal that rocked the NBA. not too long ago with players shaving points. There had been sports betting scandals in the NBA before. In fact, NBA is one that has had many, if I'm not mistaken. There was a quote unquote mobbed up a referee that was in cahoots with organized crime. If Jason Herzog is compromised, that would be massive. That would be very, very massive. So again, do not take this as fact. This could be 100% horseshit, and I completely acknowledge it, but I did want to at least throw it in there that this is the conversation that is going on online. To put it into perspective, this was such an unexpected shift that ESPN MMA, ESPN's own official account, already had a tweet queued up saying that Dulgarian gets the job done by submission. Now you could say, oh, this is just, something that was done in error. This was a slip of the fingers, perhaps somebody who didn't know the fighters, etc., etc. No, that's not what I think it is. As a person who works in marketing, what I believe that this is, and again, I could be certainly wrong about this, but what I believe it is that they had the text already queued up, had to scramble to change the tweet, and just got the information wrong, hit send too early. That would be my own speculation on that. Could be 100% wrong, but that's what I'm saying. So this is just putting into context how crazy it is that this happened in the first place. So much so that the analysts on the desk panel after the show, which I believe included Michael Chiesa, Michelle Watterson, I think that Rashad Evans was on there, and Karen Bryant is general. I believe that was the four. They were talking about how very ridiculous this was. If you watched this fight, you will know that Isaac Dulgarian, who is A, normally a finisher himself, and B, a person who has never been finished in this sport, how amazingly poorly he was fighting in this fight. DC on commentary was saying the same thing. Why is Dulgarian punching behind his head when he should be attacking the arms to get his neck free from the submission attempt? This is not how a high-level mixed martial artist would handle a rear naked choke or potential one. Everybody who watched this fight saw a very one-sided fight. Dulgarian was the more experienced fighter. He is a very high-level wrestler, and he was beaten at his own game. The high-level wrestler and grappler was submitted by a newcomer, and that raises red flags all across the board. To put it in perspective on what happens in these kinds of situations as far as the repercussions go, you can go back to Dana from what he said during the James Krause incident when he was asked about that.
We let these guys know not to bet on fights. Do you know what the outcome of this is? Like, if I penalize them, you get cut. They're going to go to fucking federal prison. Federal fucking prison. If you're that fucking stupid and somebody else wants to do it, knock yourself out. There's not enough money in it to ruin your life and not go to jail. Go to federal prison.
Yeah, so that's what Dana says. However, James Krause not in federal prison. I don't believe that Derek Minner is in federal prison. So what is the outcome of all of this? And I don't want to get into another socio-political discourse here, but in these times where we are seeing massive lawlessness in the United States, I don't know if there is going to be any repercussions from all of this necessarily. However, the FBI certainly needs to look into this. I suspect we're going to be hearing a lot more about this in the coming days and weeks. Isaac Dulgarian and his career certainly in question right now. This is a major potential scandal that is just now unfolding and took place last night. So that's what we have about it now. I'll keep you updated on these things as information comes out. But as of right now, these are the facts. We had Isaac Dulgarian in a fight that appears to be either fixed or compromised in some way, and this is the fallout currently, is just the discourse right now. We are awaiting further action. So thank you very much for watching, for yelling about mixed martial arts. This has been Thinker St. James. Like and subscribe.